So tell us about your experience of music in the 80s. What were some of your
I used to go and see a
things?
lot of music in the 80s. I started seeing music when I was about sort of probably 15, and one of the benefits that I actually had was always being tall. I never had sort of a trouble sort of getting into venues and things like that, and I used to collect a lot of vinyl records, and I think the genre of live music that I really liked. I used to listen to a lot of bands from overseas, and I used to buy their records, but I used to love seeing live stuff, and of course the only stuff I could really see here was Australian stuff. And I suppose the stuff that I really loved, I suppose it was a genre called skate punk, and that would actually, there'd be bands like, the Hellmen and Master Peel and the Hard-Ons, who were just, and I suppose what they were bands that came out of, I suppose, probably an American 70s sensibility, like garage rock and things like Iggy Pop and the Stooges. And what they were just high energy bands. So what so you'd actually go and you would actually go to these sort of venues like like the Trade Union Club, and you'd listen to someone like the Hard-Ons, and it would just absolutely and utterly go off, and so and what was sort of interesting is that there was also the 80s was also a time of vinyl records. So what you would actually get in the 80s, aside from from actually seeing these bands, you would actually go and you would actually buy their records, and there were actually record shops, and there were huge communities around these record shops and the albums, and the albums were fantastic because all the bands that I just mentioned, they had fantastic covers to the records. They had you could actually pull the records out of the sleeves and read the lyrics on the front and the back, and there'd be fantastic artwork on the posters for their gigs and things. So what it was like this real sort of cult, there's a real community around these around all these sort of bands, and what I sort of particularly enjoyed about the bands that I just mentioned is there was a real sort of fusion of, I suppose, street art and sort of music and things like that, all sort of like coming together, because like a lot of the bands like the Hard-Ons, for example, I think it was the bass player was actually the person that did all the artwork for their covers, and he was a really fantastic artist. So that was So I think there's some of the memories that I have.
Do you think that we've lost a little bit of that today? That sort of...
Oh, look, I think we have. I wouldn't say we've lost it. I think it's just sort of morphed into something else, and I still think that probably the people that are probably my age, the people that are my age, when I was a teenager, people that are my age, now I think they'll probably hold on to sort of particular sorts of memories, because I think, for example, now the fact that you can actually listen to a wide range of bands. And you can sort of do that digitally. There's incredible value in that. Whereas, for example, when I was a teenager, you really had to seek things out. You had to actually buy music papers. Like, you had to buy things like, there was a music paper in Sydney called On the Street, and the successor to that became the Drum Media, and that was the hub around which the entire music community gravitated. And and music then was a very arduous process of discovery. So what you would have to do is you would have to go to record stores, you'd have to flip through vinyl, you'd have to pull the vinyl out, and you'd have to go and ask the person at the record store to actually play the record, so you could listen to the music, or you'd hear about it from your friends and say, oh, look, you've got to listen to this band. Now, there's something beautiful about that discovery as well, because you actually put a lot of work into it, and the thing is, when you actually listen to the band, it becomes very meaningful for you. But I think at the same time, I think, oh wow, wouldn't it be fun to actually just have all that access online, so you could actually discover bands in a different way. So I think they both have their sort of value, and I think sort of coming to a show like this and seeing all these posters, it does make me very nostalgic, in the sense that what bands had then is they had, for example, with records, because actually collecting the vinyl was such an integral part of the sort of the music culture. I think it sort of makes me nostalgic, I think, for the whole sense of collectability of the thingness of things. So, for example, now, I suppose when many people listen to music like myself, I've got an enormous music collection of probably about 20,000 songs on my iTunes, but it's all digital, so which is fine, which is how I enjoy it. But in those days, it was really like, I'd have my record pile or my boxes of records, and actually touching them and holding them and looking at the artwork, that was something in itself. So, and I think that that's definitely gone. but then again, too, I don't think that the value of music has sort of lessened, because I think it's transformed into something which has allowed music now to be experienced by a greater number of people. And I think there's probably more music than there's ever been in history now. And there's probably more live music than there's ever been. And I think that the net and the web has sort of allowed that. So what it's meant is it's meant that if you're a young person in a band now, your community can quickly listen to because distributing records is it's obviously digital now, whereas in those days you really had to have the money to go get the record pressed, and you'd have to get it into a record shop. So I think it's changed. So I wouldn't say it's lost, but I think it's just changed into something else.
And new opportunities.
Yeah, which I think is sort of which I think is sort of which I think is sort of better, actually, because I think it's sort of, like I said before, it's just meant now that if you aspire to make music, it's easier than it ever has been to be heard and to be discovered.